Hey, seventh graders. Today's assignment is the Domains of Life assignment and as well as the taxonomic ranks. So you guys are going to kind of talk about how you guys finished up that card classification activity and how that relates to this concept of domains of life, and then also how it ties into taxonomic rank, which you guys will see throughout the next couple lessons, and then also how it ties in with domains as well. So your learning targets for today, I can classify organisms into one of the three domains of life. So if I give you a bacteria, you guys can put it in the correct spot. If I give you guys like an elephant, you guys know what domain it belongs in, those kinds of things. I can identify different characteristics we use to classify living organisms. Again, this kind of ponytails or pigtails off of what we did yesterday, with the card classification activity. And then other ways we classify organisms past what we did yesterday in class. And then I can use taxonomic rank to identify an organism. So these are all systems that scientists or taxonomists use now to take life and break it up based on common characteristics that different living organisms have. Okay, so the first thing you guys need to do is your notebook. You guys need to open your OneNote. You need to copy and paste this picture into the Domains of Life section of your taxonomy notebook, okay, in your OneNote. And on slide 3, you guys need to copy and paste this picture and put it into the taxonomic rank section. Okay, both of these are in your OneNote. You guys shouldn't be creating a new OneNote for that. So go ahead, take a second, pause this video, and then once you guys are done adding these two pictures to your notebook, come on back to this video, hit play, and we'll talk about what these notes have in them. All right, so you guys should have just added this to your OneNote, okay? The other day we talked about all the 7 criteria that we use to consider something living or non-living. Okay, remember that at any point, if one of those criteria is not met, it's either not living to begin with or it was living and now it's dead. So we talked about pulling the apple off the tree, no longer has the ability to grow and develop, therefore it's no longer considered living. But when it was on the tree, it was growing and developing and then was considered living, okay? So if we take all of the living organisms on Earth and we were to try to divide them into groups, our very first division we would have is called domains. So we only have 3 domains. We take everything living in the world and we're only breaking them into 3 groups. This is not what we talked about yesterday quite yet, because if you guys notice, one of our domains is bacteria. While there was probably bacteria all over those cards, okay, I didn't have any actual pictures of bacteria to be represented on those cards. So one of our domains is domain bacteria, one's domain archaea, which is pretty uncommon, and then one is domain eukarya, which is very common, as well as, again, domain bacteria is very common. Okay, so we're going to talk about what scientists use, what characteristics they use to divide these into those 3 different domains. All of it basically comes down to how many cells are in the organism and how complex and big those cells are. So if we look at domain bacteria, those cells are really, really small and really simple. Okay, just like the human body has a bunch of organs, cells can have organelles as well. And the more organelles they have, the more complex their function is. If we look at bacteria, bacteria actually doesn't have hardly any organelles at all. So they're very, very small and they're very, very simple. Okay, versus if we were to look at cells in domain eukarya, they're going to be way bigger. If we compared like a skin cell to a bacteria cell, the skin cell would be so much bigger than the bacteria cell. Okay, but we also see that with human cells, animal cells, any of these in domain eukarya, they're very, very large, very, very complex. So they're large because they have a bunch of organelles, and they're complex because they have a bunch of organelles. So they kind of have a little bit of a higher functioning level there. And then generally, all these organisms that we see in domain eukarya are going to be the organisms that you guys are most familiar with as far as living organisms, plants, animals, fungus, all those kinds of things. They're very large and complex, and they're multi-celled. So our body as a human is made up of millions and millions and millions of cells. Okay, so all of these in this are going to be very complex, and then most of them are made up of like tons and tons of cells. Okay. Versus bacteria. Bacteria, of all the living things in the world, is probably one of the most common organisms because they're so small. There's a lot of them in a certain area, and you guys have these all over your skin. You have them in your body. You have them on your hands, all over your tables. I mean, you name it, there's bacteria there. Okay, so you guys are going to see this being one of the most common living things on Earth is actually bacteria. Okay, so super common, find them everywhere. This little guy down here, though, is domain archaea, and they're a bacteria, but they're a very, very unique bacteria because they're small, just like bacteria are. But they have really special mechanisms in them. So it's kind of like they have a special technology, and that technology allows them to live in really, really extreme environments. So I'm not thinking like Antarctica, like humans can live in Antarctica. That's not extreme. When I mean extreme, I'm talking about like thermal hot pots like you guys would see in Glacier that you hear about the tourists that fell in, or the antelope or whatever that fell into this hot pot and there was nothing left to be found of them. Okay, things can't live there except organisms in domain archaea. So they actually love it. So as things are dying in there, they're kind of hanging out like they're chilling in a jacuzzi. Okay, so they're single-celled. They live in extreme places like hot pots, geysers, volcanoes, sulfur pots, so something with high chemical content too, not necessarily just hot, but something with just really harsh environments that no other living organism can survive. That's where we would find domain archaea. So those are our 3 domains of life. Okay, each domain is then broken down into kingdoms, and when we talk about taxonomic rank here in a second, you guys will see the same organization system. So all domains are broken down into kingdoms. Since there's so many bacteria on Earth, the number of kingdoms they would have is just outrageous. Like there's a ton of them, more than I could ever list on this little piece of paper. Therefore, and because it's also more common and familiar to you guys, we're just going to focus on domain eukarya. So this is where that activity of the card classification that you guys did the other day with all the little cards with the animals or the pictures on them kind of plays in. If you guys remember in class, we kind of sorted them, and you guys might have been off on your first time sorting them, and that's okay. Generally, this is a pretty easy way to sort them, where we have Kingdom Animalia. You guys saw a lot of those cards were in Animalia, or animals. We had Kingdom Fungi. You guys only saw one little mushroom card that would have fallen under Kingdom Fungi. And then you guys saw 3 cards had the Kingdom Plantae, okay? We didn't see any protists on those cards, and we'll come back and talk to them. You guys have seen them this year, but not on those cards. So we'll talk about that here in a second. The main thing, though, that we're going to talk about with these is how they get their food, okay? So these are all complex. They're big cells. Most of these are multicellular with the exception of protists, which, again, we're going to talk about here in a second. So the main reason we sort animals into the animal kingdom and fungus into the fungus kingdom and plants into the kingdom Plantae is based on how they get their food. Okay, we know that animals eat their food. They're consumers. They have to put food into their body where they digest it, break it down, and then absorb the nutrients from within their body. Okay, Kingdom Plantae we know uses light from the sun or energy from the sun, carbon dioxide and water to make their own food, and then they can use that food for energy. And then Kingdom Fungi is a little bit different. So I might have, you guys remember me talking about that. They actually kind of digest or decompose outside of their body. So it's almost kind of like they secrete chemicals outside of their body. Those chemicals decompose dead matter and break it down into something they can absorb, and then they absorb it from the outside of their body. So they have no need for a stomach, but they're still consumers or decomposers just the same as animals are. They just have a different way of doing it. Okay, so that's where we would sort, all right, you're an animal because you guys have to bring food in. You're a fungus because you decompose it on the outside and bring it in. And then you're a plant because you can make your own food, okay? Protists down here are unique. They are single cellular, but if you guys were to compare them to bacteria, again, these cells would be huge and very complex. The other day we played the is it living, non-living, or was once living and now dead Kahoot game. Okay, in that game I showed you guys an amoeba, and I probably pulled up a video to show you guys an amoeba eating a paramecium. They kind of just wrap their body around them. So they can be consumers, they can be like plants, and they can make their own food. The reason we stick them in domain eukarya, though, is because they're much bigger and complex. So even though they're unicellular and they kind of have different ways of getting their own food, because they have complex big cells, that's why we find them in domain eukarya and not like bacteria or archaea. Okay, so complex and large, you guys might see some like phytoplankton create their own food just like plants do. Some like consumers, like the amoeba you saw, have to eat their food to get their energy. But again, the main reason is that they're complex, and so that's why they're eukarya. Okay, so those are our domains, our 3 domains of life, and then I just showed you 4 kingdoms in domain eukarya. There's a lot of other kingdoms that exist in domain bacteria and domain archaea, but we're not going to get into those because it gets a lot more hairy and complicated. All right, so let's take a look at this. This is what we call taxonomic ranks. So you guys should already recognize domain and kingdoms right there. So from there, we would keep using more specific characteristics to keep breaking our organisms into groups. So the next one we would do are called phylums, classes, orders, family, genus, and species. Notice that genus and species are highlighted. Okay, when we look at those and the scientific names of those, scientific name, if you guys think of like Homo sapien is a scientific name for a human. Okay, that's the genus and the species of a human being. So genus is Homo, species is sapien. I'm going to show you guys an example. Okay, one little mnemonic device to kind of help you remember the order of these is Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti. The dear is domain, king, kingdom, Philip, phylum, came, class, over, order, for, family, great, genus, and spaghetti, species. So Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti. So that'll help you guys remember the order. Domain comes first. Okay. All right, let's take a look at an example, and then I'll show you guys how to do your assignment. The common name for this one is human. This is the example I was just kind of talking to you guys about. So we know a human being. They're in the domain eukarya. So all of your guys' organisms that you guys choose today are also going to be in domain eukarya. We don't want to get into bacteria or archaea because they're just a little bit more complicated and it gets a little weird. Okay, kingdom, animalia, because we are consumers, we eat to get our food and we're multicellular. Okay, phylum is chordata. That means that we have an internal skeleton that protects our nervous system. Okay, class mammalia, we're mammals. Okay, and then from there we got order, primates, family, hominidae, genus, Homo, and species, sapien. So you guys can see if the scientific name is down here, it's Homo sapien. Again, our genus is Homo, our species is sapien. So I'm going to show you guys kind of how I got that information. I'm going to go ahead and go to Wikipedia. I know I don't usually preach about using Wikipedia, but for this case, they have a really nice way of organizing taxonomic rank. I'm going to show you guys the human being example, and then I'm also going to show you guys another example. So when you guys are doing your homework on the next slide, you have a better idea of how you guys are going to get to the end of it. So I'm going to go ahead and search human. When I look up human, I should see this little yellow box on the right. And if you guys scroll down, you're going to see domain, they write eukarya a little bit different. So they have different scientific names of saying things. So you guys can just stick to eukarya. So domain eukarya, kingdom animalia, phylum chordata, class mammalia, order primates. This is just what I wrote down. If you guys see things that aren't listed there that I showed you guys, like suborder, infraorder, or subfamily and tribe, just go ahead and ignore those. I just want you guys to stick to the ones I showed you on the taxonomic rank notes: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Okay, when we get down to our genus is Homo, and then our species is actually just sapien. So the H just stands for the genus, so you guys don't have to put that little initial there. Okay, so your genus would just be Homo, your species would just be sapien, and then right here it says binomial name, that's our scientific name, Homo sapiens. Okay, so that's how I filled out excuse me, wrong one. That's how I filled out this sheet right here. So on the next slide, you guys are going to choose another animal, plant, something in domain eukarya. Again, something that's more common to you guys. I wouldn't get too complicated or crazy with that because you might find that it gets a little messy. So the example I want to show you guys right here is an elephant. Okay. I pull up an elephant and I look over at that yellow box and I notice that it stops at family. Okay, that's because there's different species of family. One thing I do want to point out, because I know someone in here is going to want to do dog, okay, dogs have different breeds, but they're all the same species. They're all dogs, okay? Wolves are different. They'd be a different species, but if we look at like a German Shepherd versus a Lab versus a Poodle, okay, they're all the same species. They're just different breeds, okay? So we kind of bred for different genetics, but they have the same things in common clear down through their genus and their class. Okay, so with the elephant though, you guys notice if we go back up and kind of read a little bit, there are 3 living species that are currently recognized. So you guys would need to pick a more specific species. If you just like type in lizard, there are so many types of lizard, you're not going to get a single species by just typing in lizard. So you guys kind of want to be a little bit more specific. Let's take, for instance, and do the Asian elephant. So if I click on Asian elephant and I look at my little square over here on the right, notice that now I'm down to my species. So I've kind of narrowed my search down a little bit more. So I've got domain eukarya, kingdom animalia, we have those 2 in common. Phylum chordata, we have that in common with elephants. Class mammalia, we have that in common. When we get to order though, that's where we start seeing differences between like humans and elephants. Okay, so our order, family, genus, and species are all different. Okay, so you guys would go ahead, choose your animals. You obviously can't do human. Now you can't do your Asian elephant. You guys are going to pick some kind of organism. It could be an animal. It could be a plant. It could be a fungus if you really want. If you know of a specific species of fungus, whatever the case is. you guys are going to go ahead and write your common name. So if I were doing mine, I'd do Asian elephant. I wouldn't just write elephant because that's not the species. Okay, I can make the text smaller if I need. Everyone's domain should be eukarya. Okay, and then from there, you guys would fill out kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and then don't forget your scientific name on the bottom there. Okay, once you guys have filled out this whole slide, you're going to go ahead and do your wrap up on this slide 6. Any questions, yes or no? If you have questions, type them here. 4, 3, 2, 1, how do you think you did on this assignment? Make sure you guys let it save before you exit out of it and hand it in. And you're good to go. So go ahead, hand this in when you're done, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.